This video covers separately the testing situation with this linear algebra course. We are a part of a pilot that is doing some testing of an online test proctoring system to make sure that it works effectively and that it's easy for students to use, easy for faculty to use, with the hopes of eventually doing testing for online courses online rather than coming into the testing center each time. So the school has a limited number of tests through a company that will do monitoring for us. And we were one of the courses that was asked to pilot one of these tests. So our first test will be taken online using this monitoring tool, and then the other two tests plus the final exam will be done on campus. So no, I can't have you do all three tests plus the final online because the school simply doesn't have enough of these testing units allocated for the summer session. But we do get to do one of them, which is good. And if it works out, then maybe you'll benefit in the fall by being able to take some of those online tests at home rather than coming into the testing center each time. But it has to be proctored in such a way that, for example, schools that you're transferring to will take our credits. If the exams are not proctored in a certain way, then those schools will not accept our credits. And of course, that's not good for you because you're spending all this time to take a course. You would like your course credits to transfer easily to wherever you're heading. So let me show you what the Canvas screen looks like and where you're going to find some of these things. All right, so back in the Canvas course, you'll notice that in the week 1 module, way down the bottom, there's a practice quiz. So by the end of the first week, which is that Sunday the 25th, I want you to take a practice quiz using the Respondus Lockdown browser and also practice uploading your work to make sure that you're aware of how everything works and also to make sure that it works on your computer. So the very first thing is, in order to do that, go to the Syllabus and Course Information tab. You notice that there's instructions to set up Lockdown browser for the practice test and for test 1. So you open that up, and it links to a set of information. So this Respondus video, that's just something that the company put forward. This is what's the important thing, is that you have to download and install a Lockdown browser onto your computer. So do this on whatever computer you're going to use when you take the test, right? Don't download this on your friend's computer and then you go to take the test and the Lockdown browser isn't where you thought it was going to be. So use the same computer that you're going to use to take test 1 to do the practice test. So download the Lockdown browser, and then you need to log into Canvas. You can use the raritanval.instructure.com, log into Canvas, and then go to the exam. That's how you get into it. So the Lockdown browser prevents you from going to any other sites except for that Canvas site with the test in it. So as soon as you start the test, it locks everything down. And it says you won't be able to access the exam that requires a Lockdown browser with a standard web browser. When you take the practice test, it's not going to go through the process of asking for a picture ID and turning on webcams and all that. When you take the real test one, it will. And so it won't let you take the test if you don't have your webcam enabled. It won't let you take the test if you don't have the Lockdown browser installed. So one of the reasons I want to do the practice test is to make sure that at least the Lockdown browser is working for it. It does give you some guidelines when taking the real exam, like making sure that you have a place that is a comfortable work environment where there's not any distractions or interruptions, like don't take this while you're at work. Make sure that you know how much time is available. It's 2 hours for the test. Clean everything off of your desk or workspace. So get rid of the books, papers, other devices. There is an on-screen calculator, and I've enabled that. So don't bring a handheld calculator with you to the online test because as it records you, is not going to know the difference necessarily between whether you're typing stuff in a calculator or whether you're using your phone to get answers, which is not allowed. So I will show you what kind of calculator that we have in just a minute. It says make sure that you're using a good firm surface. Take the exam in a well-lit room. There's different places that are available for help. When you click on the left side where it says Lockdown browser, now yours is going to look a little different than mine, but the tabs up on the top have video tutorials and guides and supports and things like that. So there is help available that way. So the first step is download that Lockdown browser. Once you have the Lockdown browser downloaded and you want to take the sample test. Now, I did put a couple of questions on there that are actual math questions, not just kind of joking around questions. So wait till you've done the first couple of sections before you take this practice test, because I do ask you, for example, to row reduce a matrix. All right, so you're going to click on this thing that says practice quiz requires lockdown browser. I gave you 30 minutes for the test. I don't think it's going to take you 30 minutes for the test, right? So once you go and you start the test, then the countdown clock begins, but you have to go into the lockdown browser first, then log into Canvas, and then open up the test. All right, so when you open up the test, you'll see, it's all correctly for preparation. And here, it doesn't matter if you see the questions in advance, right? Some of them just ask you to do little things to see that you know how to take a quiz on Canvas. You'll see that some of the questions, and that'll be true also of the test, have these big like essay type windows. These are where you're going to take a separate sheet of paper and work the problem out and then submit it at the end. All right, so you work that out. There's some multiple choice questions, and then there's a box that just has some information. Now, keep this in mind. Lockdown browser prevents you from accessing things on your computer. So at the end, I want you to upload your work. Right? When you start the test, you're going to have some sheets of paper in front of you. You're going to work out problems or whatever, and then I'm going to ask you to submit them online. Well, I can't ask you to submit them through the lockdown browser because the lockdown browser won't let you access your computer while you're taking the test. So what you're going to do is you're going to finish up the test. You're going to hit submit to submit. Down the bottom it says submit quiz, so you hit submit quiz, and it then lets you exit out of the lockdown browser when you're done. Then what you're going to do is log into the course as you would normally, and you're going to come down to where it says practice quiz work upload, open that up, and then it's just simply a one question test. Upload this file. So you upload the file that you've done. And so I want to be able to see that you have figured out how to install the lockdown browser, that you can use it to take a test. In this case, it's like a 4-question quiz, that you can exit out of the lockdown browser, go back into Canvas, and upload your work. That's the process that we're going to use when we take that first test. So I know it's not worth very many points, the practice test, but I need you to take the practice test so that you know how the real one works. All right, I mentioned that the real test involves a calculator on the toolbar. So if you want to see what it looks like, lockdown browser calculator respondus. There it is. All right. So you can actually pull it up like this. Notice that I don't have any kind of special link. I just went to a public page with their technical support. So I've enabled the scientific calculator. This is what the scientific calculator looks like. It looks very much like the calculator that comes with Windows. So for us, it's mostly going to be a matter of computational stuff. You notice that it does have like trig functions and hyperbolic trig and stuff like that. We really don't need that. There's a natural log button up there. If you need exponents, they do have an x squared and an x cubed. Beyond that, they have an x to the y button, which I assume you can use for square roots also, right? 4 to the 0.5 power is a square root of 4. Although they do have a cube root and an nth root, they have a factorial, a 10 to the x. So the types of calculations we're going to do is mostly the stuff that's over here. Reciprocals, the pi button, and so forth. So that's going to be available up on the lockdown browser toolbar. But like I said, don't bring the handheld calculator to the online test, because then it's not going to know the difference between you cheating on the test with a phone versus you legitimately typing in numbers into your calculator. All right. On the actual test day, when you're ready to take the test, the first test, the one that's being done online, can be taken on June 2nd or June 3rd. So I think I'm going to open it up like 8 o'clock in the morning on June 2nd and close it at 10 o'clock at night on June 3rd. It's located on the top of the week 3 module. So you notice that the first thing it says is test number 1 requires Respondus lockdown browser and webcam. All right, so when you are ready to take this test, make sure that before you open up that lockdown browser that you have everything set. You've got a few pieces of paper, pencils, eraser, you've got a picture ID with you, and you're ready to go, and you've cleaned off your area of anything you don't need. Books, notes, phones, tablets, other computers, anything that could be taken as cheating on the test, right? And so go into the lockdown browser, go into Canvas, open it up. It's going to ask you to do a couple of preliminary things like show your face, show your picture ID. It asks you don't wear a hat while you're taking the test because it becomes hard to see your face. I do understand that you're going to have work in front of you, and sometimes you're going to put your face down while you're working and then pop back up to do the next question. So I do understand that. But again, the system's going to look for, what else are you doing while you're taking the test. All right, like we had said last time, once you get done with the test, you're going to have pages of work. Exit out of the lockdown browser completely, then go back in and submit your work file. So I'm going to ask you to do that within about 15 minutes of taking the test. If it's 16 minutes, the world's not going to end. But you shouldn't be finishing the test and then an hour goes by and then the work comes in, right? The work should be done pretty quickly. So take that work file, scan it in. When you scan in the work file, organize everything, make sure I can find problem numbers. If there's answers to box the answers, and then scan it into a single Word or PDF file. Make sure, again, everything's in order because I'm going to need to see the work as I grade the test. And then submit your work file, right? It says it's only worth 2 points, but I'm not going to grade the test if I don't have a work file to go with it. So please make sure you upload that work file as soon as you're done. Quit the lockdown browser, go in and set the work file. So if you want to see, here I'll pick a test that you're not going to take, right? Just so that you can see some of the formattings of the test. So some parts of the test will have fill in the blank ones. So if it's a very simple problem, you might only have a line or two of work, and then you just enter the answers in there. So if there's a box like that to enter answers, enter the numbers. If you see a big box like that, then that's something that you're going to do the work on a separate sheet of paper. Now, if it's an explanation thing and you're comfortable typing the answer in the box over here, there is a math type button where you can hit the button and it'll give you various equation editor things. If it's a quick, simple thing and you're comfortable to do that, then that's fine. I just don't want you to take time out of the 2 hours formatting things when it's just as easy to write on the sheet of paper. Other short fill in the blank things you can do. There might be some that have drop down boxes. If there's a drop down boxes, make those choices there. If you come across the multiple choice questions, then check the order. Sometimes, as you can see here, Canvas scrambles them a little bit. So if I have 5 choices, and just don't automatically think that B is, well, in this case, B is the second one. Don't automatically think that A is the first one, because in this case, E is the first choice and A is the fourth choice. So just be careful of things like that. Every once in a while, it does something like that. Right. And so those are the types of things that you'll see on the test. If you see those big boxes, then assume that that's something that you're going to do on that sheet of paper. If you see a little fill in the blank, you don't have to show any work for the multiple choice. So, I mean, you're welcome to upload your work at the end for the multiple choice, but those I don't need the work for. But I do need the work for anything else, especially those ones that have the big open boxes for you to fill in the work. All right, then the other 2 tests in the final exam, you're going to take in the testing center. And so for the testing center, you're going to make appointments in advance. So if you go to test 2, which is this week over here. Yes, test 2, chapters 4 and 5. If you click on that, it gives you information, right? I put a link to the testing center. Notice that the testing center tends to close at 4:30 on a Friday. So if you're going to take the test on that Friday, get there early enough that you get your full 2 hours. If you show up at like 3:30, they'll let you take the test, but they're only going to give you an hour for it. They do close at 4:30. I gave you a link for the appointments of the test. They usually open up the testing appointments about 2 weeks in advance, so you can make those appointments a little bit early. When you go to the testing center, you will need your photo ID. You'll also need a scientific calculator. Bring some pencils with you. They'll make you store anything else that you bring, like your phone or books or things like that, in a sealed bag and then in a little locker. Okay, so the second test, you have the 12th or the 13th to take it. The third test, similarly, I have a placeholder for it here, right? Chapter 6 and 7, 23rd or 24th, and then the final exam on the 26th. So for those 3 tests, you're going to take them on campus in the testing center. Those links will get you to a spot where you can make an appointment, but that first test is taken online. So hopefully this clears things up a little bit and gives you a reference point for taking both that practice test, which obviously is going to help to let me know if there's any issues. And once you take that practice test, if there's issues with it or you can't get the lockdown browser working, let me know, because that's the information that I need. And I set it so that we have a whole week between the time that practice test happens and the real one happens, so that we can iron out some of those technical issues, because what I don't want to happen is you start the test or you go to take the test and suddenly the system isn't working and, it's 8 o'clock at night and nobody is around on that last day to answer questions. So hopefully that clears things up. If there's questions beyond that, drop me an email and I will answer things as best I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out from somebody who does. And then the other thing I want to mention is when you get done taking that online test, if you have some feedback on the experience, things that you like, things you didn't like about the system, let me know, because again, this is a pilot to see how it works and whether this is something that we want to go forward with. So if you really like it and you're enthusiastic and you're like, yes, I wish I could take all my tests online this way, let me know. If you're like, this was a terrible experience, please don't make anybody else go through it, I need to know that too, because policy decisions are going to be based on those types of feedback. So again, if you like, didn't like, or if you're neutral, it doesn't matter either way. That feedback is helpful because our results combined with the other couple of classes that are doing this will help to shape the school's policy. So thank you for helping us out with that.